Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
India is the road accident capital of the world, with 12.5% of global road accidents happening here. To put that into perspective, there's one serious road accident taking place every minute, and 16 people are losing their lives every hour on Indian roads. According to the United Nations, India suffers a loss of $58 billion every year due to road accidents. So the loss is physical, it's financial, but more than anything else, it's a huge emotional and personal loss for the loved ones of those who die on India's roads. Hello and welcome to Diageo and Network18 present Road to Safety, our special initiative that's aimed at creating awareness about road safety. Through this series, we are hosting meaningful conversations with stakeholders on how to make Indian roads safer and how to save precious lives. On the show with me today are David Ward, Secretary General, Global New Car Assessment Program or NCAP, Abanti Sankarnarayanan, Chief Strategy and Corporate Relations Officer at Diageo, Lachlan McIntosh, Chair of NCAP and President, Australasian College of Road Safety, Adrian Walsh, Director of Road Safe and Convener of Prince Michael International Road Safety Awards UK, and Rohit Baluja, President of the Institute of Road Traffic Education. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome, Abanti. Thank you so much for being with us on the show. The statistics are pretty grim. Abanti, let me start with you. Diageo is an organization that has taken up this campaign, Road to Safety. As of now, there are efforts being made by the public sector, by the private sector, by NGOs. But do you believe that most of these efforts still exist in silos and there needs to be a far more collaborative and cohesive approach towards dealing with road safety and the menace of irresponsible driving?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we as Diageo actually want to do, Mridu. So what we want is to really create a coordinated, vibrant movement on road safety in India. And what that really means is bring a coordinated set of actions by relevant stakeholders in a way that we can make a meaningful difference to the alarming statistics that you just mentioned, and you know, kind of put a bit of a stop to the enormous loss that's happening on account of road safety.
Right. And all of you are stakeholders in this whole Road to Safety program. David, one of the visions that NCAP has is that by 2020, global auto manufacturers must adhere to the minimum crash test standards that have been established by the UN. How do you see that vision shaping up for India, and how committed is the automaker community to this vision?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say is that there's no silver bullet for improving safety anywhere in the world, let alone in India. So we need a combination of safer vehicles, safer roads, safer users with better enforcement, better road design. But the vehicle piece is important, and India is becoming a very significant player globally. It's now the 5th largest producer of vehicles in the world. So there's a great opportunity for India to take leadership here. And the good news is that it has. The Indian government has now legislated for better crash test standards, and that's really important because you can't rely simply on voluntary initiatives from the industry. But also, which is very encouraging, is we are seeing manufacturers now in our crash test program, which is a voluntary program, starting to get very good results, much better even than the regulations require. And that's the kind of the sweet spot we want to get to, where there's a minimum floor of regulation, so we have no more so-called zero-star cars that collapse on impact. But beyond that, manufacturers are competing against each other to offer ever better levels of safety, more affordable prices, and also that consumers are aware of the importance of the choices they make when they're buying a vehicle.
Right. Mr. McIntosh, you've just launched the Stop the Crash campaign in India. What are some of the findings that you've been able to achieve with it in other emerging markets, and what are you hoping to achieve with it here in India?
Well, Stop the Crash is a good opportunity to demonstrate the newer technologies that are coming into the market to reduce collisions. I think, you know, David's right, there are no actual silver bullets, but there's a lot of small bullets that will help. And these technologies of particularly for motorcycles, for cars, to use the electronic technology to stop skidding, to stop collisions occurring, using radar, to keep lanes together, that stop the crash is an opportunity to demonstrate, using the manufacturers collectively who make these devices, to show people the difference. Those things are now becoming commonplace around the world, but it takes a long time for people who've been driving for 10 or 20 years or 40 years to say, oh, I don't need that. I'm a good driver. I know how to do all these things.
Do you think some of those things need to be made mandatory?
Well, ideally mandatory, but equally manufacturers can bring them in without mandating them. I mean, and we can demonstrate that. And if consumers say, I won't buy a motorcycle unless it has ABS, I won't buy a car unless it has collision avoidance technologies, the regulations will be surpassed. But regulations help because manufacturers want to do things together, but we can't wait for regulations. We shouldn't be waiting for people to all agree when we know these things work. They work. And stop the crashes about showing people how they work.
Adrian, your organisation RoadSafe brings together some of the road safety professionals from public and private sectors. You also have something called the Safe System approach that is used to reduce casualties. Tell us more about that approach. How relevant is it to India, and what are some of the lessons you've been able to learn from there?
The Safe System is really a concept that was begun with, effectively put into play in Sweden with a Vision Zero, which almost is self-explanatory, but the principle behind it is quite simple, really. We look at ourselves and we are the weak link in the road network. Humans make mistakes. Now, quite a lot of road safety has been trying to change human behaviour, and that's been very unsuccessful. You know how unsuccessful driver training can be. You still have bad drivers at the end of it. People don't obey the laws, crossing the road and so on. So this approach to road safety is different in that it makes certain that the human is protected in every possible way when the human makes the mistakes that they will inevitably make. Right. And the in-car safety is a classic example. You've just heard about the NCAP system, which is really primarily was set up to begin with to protect the occupants of the car itself. Right. It's moved, it's developed, because it's quite possible now to build a car which, if it bumps into a pedestrian, it won't hurt the pedestrian as badly as it used to do. Right. And the idea of the safe system is not to protect people from injury, but it's to protect them from ideally death and, if possible, serious injury.
Mr. Baluja, there has been some sort of policy push towards road safety. The new Motor Vehicles Amendment Bill of 2017, sanctioned much higher penalties for drivers. Also, insurance for the injured or deceased. There's also a Good Samaritan law in place for bystanders who help victims on the road. But where is the enforcement? Where is the enforcement? Because we're still losing 16 precious lives every hour on roads. So is it largely an enforcement problem, or is it a design and engineering problem? Awareness, of course, is one of the areas that various people and entities are working on. What's your take?
I think it's comprehensively a whole need for a political will to come in. I mean, the first thing is standard operating procedures, codes of practice for road and traffic engineering. That seems to be missing. We don't have traffic engineering. We don't have traffic engineers onto the road. That's the basis. Then comes the next is legislation. Now, legislation is old, and it's not only the Motor Vehicles Act, it is also the rules of road regulations. And so these also need to be changed.
Right.
Then comes the third thing is driver training. As you know, that we don't have anything called a realistic driver training, because anybody can get a license.
Yeah.
And moreover, we need a license which is based upon our legislation. And that is quite missing. After having completed all that, then we come to enforcement.
Yeah.
And again, you see in the enforcement, a whole system that enforcement training is important. Today we are missing out a big chunk of training.
Yeah.
In our police training schools, academies and colleges, we don't have a course on traffic management. And it is not the police who has to do traffic engineering, which they are doing today. And so a whole complexity is there which needs to be handled, and it has to be done with the political will.
Absolutely. So on that note, we are going to take a quick break, but the conversation continues right here. Stay tuned to our special show. Diageo and Network 18 present Road to Safety. Welcome back to Diageo and Network 18 present Road to Safety. On the show today, we are deliberating on how Indian roads can be made much safer. Mr. McIntosh, what are some of the latest vehicle safety technologies that automakers around the world must adhere to as minimum standards? We started with seat belts, we brought in airbags to a certain extent. What next for the next decade of automaking?
Well, there are, I think, a range of technologies that will make a difference. Very simply, collision avoidance that stops you running from the car in front, keeping to the lane so that you don't wander off. I mean, pretty difficult in some of the urban areas in India. Most people seem to drive on the lane rather than off the lane. But there are technologies, and for driver behaviour, it seems to me it's a shame in a way that we have to enforce the driver to do certain things when the technology will make a difference. Yeah. There are fatigue devices which read your eyes, are very sophisticated, and tell you when you're going to sleep. A lot of fleet manufacturers, you read them around the world, a lot of international corporations are insisting that if you want to deliver a product from A to B and it's a 10-hour drive or an 8-hour drive, that the time required for the driver and watching the driver, you have to have those devices in the car. The technologies are there. Electronic stability control, collision avoidance, lane keeping, fatigue detection. Yeah. There are a raft of these new technologies being rolled out. They're not expensive, and the more they're rolled out, the less the cost, and the more they can be picked up and used in India just as in any other country.
Abanti, at Diageo, you've taken up this whole Road to Safety program as part of your CSR initiative. What will it really take to make this a nationwide movement? What is the Diageo approach to that? And what are some of the outcomes of the last couple of years that you've found through this particular campaign?
So at Diageo, as you said, our intention is very clearly that we want to have a huge difference being made to this problem through multiple stakeholder engagement, because the problem is quite complex and has many dynamics which the panel has spoken about. So really what we want to do is to be a catalyst, and we are working and bringing together all stakeholders. It could be reputed non-profit organizations such as some of the people who are represented here on this panel, state and national state governments and the ministry in the center, which actually endorses the Road to Safety program, universities and educators, and very importantly traffic enforcement departments across states. So these are all people that we are working with. This is actually the 5th year that we are running the Road to Safety program, and the whole idea is that we make a significant difference to what I call the 4 E's of traffic management, which is education, enforcement, emergency services, and engineering. Right. And it's through really 4 or 5 things: public awareness campaigns, asking for and highlighting safety improvements, some of which has been discussed, legislation, and even judicial activism where required. So that's what we are trying to catalyze. And the Diageo experience has been across different countries that we have been doing this program in. And what we have found is if you look at alcohol-related road fatalities across developed countries such as the US, Europe, Japan, and Canada, what you do find is over a 10-year period, there is a significant reduction. So in the US, for instance, it's about a 22% reduction. In Europe, it's about 50% reduction in alcohol-related traffic fatalities. So that's only one contributor, only one aspect. So that then encourages us to say, hey, this can be done in other markets as well. Right. And so those are the outcomes we are seeing in other countries. Right. And that's what we want to achieve here. But it's not going to happen in 1, 2, or 3 years. I think it will take longer.
Process, yeah. David, would you like to add to that?
I think it's a point also that Rohit made about political will. Part of the really important thing is to understand the political will is also about creating a dynamic of integration. On the case of drink driving, the countries that have succeeded, it's not been doing one thing in isolation. There's been very effective advertising, for example in the UK, about drink driving, but it was backed up by enforcement, directly linked, targeted over festive periods and things like that. And it was the combination of raising awareness and the threat you're going to get punished that brought about behavior change. And now this technology piece is coming into play because there are technologies now called alkolocks, which basically can detect breath of the driver, and basically the car stops working. And so the real dynamic action now around alcohol is this combination of awareness linked directly to enforcement and with a technology which can work very effectively, for instance, in commercial fleets where you have professional drivers. It's very simple. If you get in the vehicle and you over the limit, the vehicle won't move. And I think that's one example, one challenge of this integrated approach working. And it affects other areas. The issue of speeding, for example, you can do the same thing. Awareness, enforcement, but now there are devices to alert the driver to the speed limit, and if necessary, control the vehicle to the speed limit. So it's this integration of awareness, enforcement, and then using the best technology.
Mr. Baluja, the Supreme Court in 2013 called the problem of road crashes in India a national emergency, and yet that was 5 years ago. Since then, the numbers haven't really improved much. Do you believe that there is need for a single comprehensive road safety law that protects perhaps vulnerable road users like cyclists, pedestrians, children commuting to school, also non-motorized transport, because these are all still grey areas when accidents happen?
I think every life is valuable. What is required today is the fixing of responsibility on why these crashes are happening. Today we have nobody responsible. When there almost about 25 to 30% failures are because of the road, but today not even a single engineer is behind. Not a person who has faultily designed the roads is behind or booked for the attempt to murder. Driver trainers are not responsible, that they're issuing licenses without proper testing and training. The enforcement is just not responsible, that they are not being trained. So today, if there is a responsibility that you are accountable to tell the nation why this death happened and why this serious injury happened, everything will fall into place. Everything. Just that one thing. And accountability and definition of who's responsible. Accountability is one thing, and incentivizing the good ones is another one. And Mr. Walsh, you're the convener of the Prince Michael International Road Safety Awards in the UK. How have these awards really helped in promoting road safety? Are there lessons in there that India could use?
I think one of them is about Diageo. Now, corporate social responsibility is a buzzword, but here's an example of a company that sells alcohol, that is promoting the safe use of the product, not just in the home, but also in a dangerous environment when driving. Now, to have achieved what Diageo has achieved in 53 countries, they've had over 300 or 400 different programs running. It's absolutely quite remarkable to put corporate effort behind that kind of education. They've gone further because they're helping to develop the police force understanding of this. This is quite remarkable. And the Prince's Awards, which have been going for over 30 years, recognise achievement and innovation. Right. That's achievement, that's innovation. Okay, so we're running out of time, so I'm going to give 30 seconds, under 30 seconds to each one of you. India has taken its baby steps on the road to safety. So what is that one parting message that you'd like to give to all stakeholders involved in the road to safety for taking this mission forward? David?
Actually, I think lots of it is leadership. You need top leadership with strong engagement from all the stakeholders.
All right.
Treat it as a national emergency.
Okay.
I think that's right. I mean, stimulus and scale, you have to, this is a huge problem. The cost, any money spent is an investment in saving lives and injuries, so we have to do it.
Adrian?
What I'd say is there's an element of shared responsibility. The leadership from government cannot deliver it on its own. Corporate organisations, public and private sector leaders need to get behind this as well. It's to their advantage. Businesses can gain business benefit by managing it well. there's an example of what really will affect everybody.
Mr. Baluja.
I mean, the prescriptions to solve road safety has to be come by research. It should be factual.
All right.
You cannot just give prescriptions without understanding pathology. So today, crash investigation should be put at the highest level to understand why crashes are happening. It should be scientific, so that whatever action we take should be factual and should lead to a remedy.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Abanti, for being with us on this special show. The message that the panel just gave you, remember, road safety is not the sole responsibility of the government or the private sector or NGOs or even the traffic police. It is as much your responsibility as mine. So let's take a pledge to drive safely and responsibly and embark on this journey of road safety. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.